Hi, Dan. We're just going to get you. There we are. You're back.
Yeah,
Thank you
there
very
I am.
much. That was an amazing amount of information on saving seeds. It's going to get everybody
Tell you
started.
the truth, in many ways, I've barely scratched the surface, but hopefully, particularly what I was doing there in the kitchen, demonstrating some of those techniques is handy. And I particularly want to encourage people to be fearless and enthusiastic. You really don't need many tools to become a seed saver. I mean, a screen, a colander, and some empty plastic peanut butter jars, and you're good to go. You know, that's the thing. We all can do this.
Oh, awesome. All right. So we have a couple of questions. Just in case you don't know where to put your chat, if you're in Feed Loop, there is a chat bar on the right-hand side. You may have to expand your screen. And if you're on Zoom, if you hover your mouse down at the bottom, you'll see a chat icon. Just press that and you'll see the column come up on the side and you can enter your question there. So
Now, I'm actually seeing the chat at the moment, Helen. Should I just go ahead and start answering some questions? I can repeat them so people know what they are.
how about I feed them to you and then you can answer from there and then everybody.
Okay, that's cool. You feed them. You pitch, I will bat.
uh, is there anything wrong with spreading washed tomato seeds, even if the gel envelope is not entirely removed?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there is something wrong with that. There's two things that the gel coat will prevent. Most importantly, it will prevent the seed from drying. That's exactly why that process of fermenting them, of letting them rot in water, is an essential part of saving seeds that have that gel coat. You want that to rot away and leave, because otherwise, even when you put the seed out in a warm, dry place, it won't dry. And if it doesn't dry, it will rot. And the second reason too is that if it remains there, even if the moisture escapes, it will slow down or prevent germination. So the reason the gel coat is there, by the way, is so that when you and I eat a tomato seed, it sprouts from our manure. Those seeds are meant to go through the guts of animals and then be deposited and germinate.
Yes, actually,
that's their space capsule.
As a kid, we found out that the hard way. We lived out in the country with a weeping field because we were on a well system, and the weeping tile broke apart. And after eating tomatoes, we did see some pop up in the yard. So yes,
yep.
They survive. In your experience, how long do tomato and pepper seeds last?
That's a really, really interesting question, because there are seeds that are 1,000 years old that have been sprouted. But for things that are the seeds of wet fruit, like tomatoes and peppers, my rough advice is 3 to 4 years if they're really well dried and really well stored in a cool, dry place. I was given some tomato seed in 2012 by a wonderful garden mentor here named Ross Travers. For an heirloom greenhouse tomato seed that grows here in Newfoundland, or was grown, called Vantage. And I now it's 2020. It's 14 years later. No, let's see. They were 2012, 2020. So 8-year-old seed, I'm getting about 50% germination. So there's two parts to the answer to the question. Even old seed will sprout. All you can do is try it and find out. But if you want to be effective in restarting the seed that you've saved, you can generally give it about 3 or 4 years for pepper and tomato seeds. That's about how long they'll store well.
And when you're doing the germination test, can you plant those seeds, or are they just like, can you go?
Yes, you absolutely can. In fact, a really neat technique to do with peas and beans, which can sometimes go moldy and rot if they're planted directly in wet soil, is to start them indoors by putting them in a tray, covering them with paper towel, and keeping them damp. And then when they sprout, then planting them. Yes, you definitely can replant them.
Good. Is the fridge a good place to store seeds?
Oh, that's complicated. Some seeds need to be very cold in order to bring about germination of the seed. So there are some kinds of seeds that like to overwinter outdoors and that rely on the cold to give them the message that it's time to sprout. But in general, the fridge is not a good place to store seeds because it tends to be a damp place, but at the same time, it's actually not. If you've ever had anything in there, like, let me think what I've seen do this. Well, if you had a block of cheese and you left it uncovered, it would get crusty and dry. So the refrigerator is too cold and it will tend to suck the water out of seeds and kill them. So it's much better to put them in a cupboard against a wall where it's cool than in the fridge.
And to kind of go on with that, like a freezer would not be a good place either then.
Seed, there's a place on the island of Svalbard in the Arctic where there is a seed repository where tens of thousands of seeds from the agriculture all around the world are being saved against emergency loss of that seed variety. And the reason they can store the seed there is that the seed is frozen. But before the seed is frozen, it must be very, very, very dry, because otherwise the ice crystals that will form inside the seed will kill the embryo that's inside the seed. So you can only freeze seed if it's really, really dry. But that is one technique for long-term seed preservation. It's not one that I use. It's not a normal home gardening or even agricultural technique.
Right, you wouldn't do that if you were just saving it for like over the winter and you wanted to plant again in the spring, right?
And one of the corollaries to the question about how long seeds last is the fact that, for example, this tomato seed. Now, I got it and I grew it, and I was looking at this seed and the germination rate was dropping every year, 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then by the time it was getting down to 50% germination, I was very concerned because I can find nothing online about Vantage tomatoes. Yet they were the big, wonderful greenhouse crop here. So they're a heritage variety. They've been growing here for 100 years. And I want to keep that variety going because it's important. It's precious. So I did the smart thing. I advertised on a local Facebook site. I said, free seeds, I'll send them to you in the mail. And then when people responded to me, and there was about a dozen that did, I said, the deal is I want your firstborn. That is to say, I will send you these seeds and you grow them out. But the very first, largest, ripest tomato, you're going to put in a box and send back to me, and I'm going to harvest the seed. And I'm happy that I did that because there was particularly one grower down the road who brought me 4 big trays of the most gorgeous tomatoes. And I've, of course, harvested the seed. Now I have hundreds of fresh seeds, which are 2019 and 2020 seeds that I can now dispense to people and sell and keep that variety alive. So it's very important to people understand that one of the reasons why seed saving is so vital is that if we don't continually save and replant these varieties, they'll be gone. Mm-hmm. There used to be 17,000 types of apples grown in North America. 17,000. So we've lost a lot and we need to hang on to what we have.
Does the germination technique work on all kinds of seeds?
I think that's a question about the germination test.
Yeah.
The simple answer is no. And the reason it's no is because I mentioned the term scarification in the video. Scarifying is the means by which seeds are prepared to sprout. And that can be freezing or cold, extreme cold. That can be cracking. That can be fire in the case of some pine seeds. That can be immersion in moisture. Let me think. And because those conditions vary so widely, immersion in dampness does not guarantee sprouting for all types of seeds. It does for most vegetable seeds, but not all.
Does old seed produce less vigorous plants even if they germinate?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know. I would suspect that to a certain extent there would be an impact on growth. But on the other hand, remember that what a seed is a bundle of genetic information. So once it sprouts, provided that the growing conditions are good, you should get roughly the same results from old seed as from newer seed. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. How do you store Egyptian onion bulblets?
I know how to do that because I've done it really badly a couple of years in a row. So the Egyptian onion bulblets, as you know, if you're familiar with these onions, grow on the top of these stalks. And the reason that we call them walking onions here in Pooch Cove and many other places is that when the stalk dries out, they literally topple over and walk and replant themselves in a new place. And they're very well adapted to winter outdoors. So one year I brought them in and I sealed them in a container. They all went moldy. I lost them. That doesn't work. And then the next year I brought them indoors and hung them up in a bag, and they all dried out and died. That doesn't work. So I could make the quick dash out to my shed and back. The shed is cool and it sometimes freezes, but I have a big basket of Egyptian onions there, bulblets, and they're just fine. So the trick to saving them is to keep them essentially outdoors, but sheltered inside a building or a shed, and to let them freeze and let them thaw, and they'll be fine.
That's good to know. Oh, we have someone joining us from Saskatoon. They said that is amazing about the Vantage tomato, and they have a seed bank there in Saskatoon where anyone can borrow seeds as long as they bring some back after harvest. So that's really good to know, and that does bring us to, if anybody has seeds they want to swap, you can visit our networking section of our event portal, and we'll try and connect you to people who might be in your area that you can swap with.
We have a seed library section in our public library, started by a local grower who also works with Food First. And it's a wonderful thing if you have a seed bank. We have a regional seed bank for the Atlantic provinces. And one of the things that they do is they put out seed that needs to be grown. And as growers, we take it on and we grow it and we keep statistics on it. And then we return the seed that we grow out to the seed bank. That's a very vital function. Yeah.
Yeah, we have our local libraries in Halton. They also have a seed library where people can borrow seeds, so to speak, and get them back. And we think that's a fabulous program. And if anybody wants to put in the comment section if they have a local seed bank in their area, that would be great too, to help out other people who might be online with you right now.
I wanted to show people this book. This is published by my friends out on Gabriola Island at New Society Publishers, Seed Libraries. And this is a journey that a woman who wasn't really familiar with seed libraries made, visiting ones across Canada and some in the United States, and talking about how that's done. One of the dangers in seed libraries is that when seeds are put out into the community and grown and then returned, is that you need really good record keeping, because there is the chance, for example, with our West Coast kale, that if somebody grows it, if they're growing another kind of kale, that it will cross. And without realizing it, they will take those seeds, they will write West Coast kale and return them to the seed bank, but they've mislabeled it because they weren't aware that the plants had hybridized. And when you have hybridized plants, only about half of them will remain true to the hybrid. And then the other two will go back to the original, the other fourths will go back to plant A and plant B. So seed libraries are a great idea, but they take a certain careful organization and record keeping in order to do the job of preserving heritage varieties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to be careful. We do have another question that was way back here. Are there any common vegetables that you find would do better if they are cold stratified in the freezer?
We're talking about the seeds, or I'm not clear.
I'm guessing like if they've been cold stratified, and that those particular vegetables would do better after you germinate them.
Oh,
Like, does anything need to have that winter?
I have to admit a lack of knowledge on that one. You can certainly find out the answer to that by going online. It's an area that I don't know enough about. I know that there's some seeds that respond very well to stratification in cold, but I don't have a good example to suggest of what they are.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's when I think of perennials, like somebody has put in like milkweed, but I don't
Oh,
know. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not sure about edibles as well. I'm trying to think of any.
yeah,
I guess any of our native vegetable varieties that would normally survive the winter here. So kind of think
that's
along those
right.
lines. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting aspect is that certainly, and I'm speaking for myself now, perfectly perennial, what we're looking for are plants that do very well in our climate. And so a lot of seed houses, particularly the ones in the US and the larger commercial ones, are growing out reliable generic seed that will do well in most climates. And therefore, those seeds from those larger seed houses, as opposed to the 90 something of us across Canada, particularly the smaller setups, are not necessarily what you want to grow, nor is that seed you want to save. It's really important that seed savers be on a quest for varieties that do very well in your particular climate, in your particular soil. And then the thing is that as you participate in that cycle, as you plant that seed and it grows, and then it goes to seed and you harvest it, and then you plant that seed, every year you're tuning that plant to your local environment. It is becoming locally acclimatized. So when people go to order seeds, they look for open pollinated or they look for organic. And even more important than those two characteristics is that the seeds be locally acclimatized. And you achieve that by going to the smaller Canadian seed companies and reading really carefully the details of the season length for production of fruit and so on. And I'm going to mention again Seeds of Diversity. This is the seed directory for members of Seeds of Diversity in the year 2012. And at that time, there was 4,920 seeds available from members of Seeds of Diversity. These are gardeners and growers across Canada. And what's really crazy about this catalog is I go partway through here, beans and gourds and lettuce and peppers and squash. And then I get to the tomatoes. Half of this is tomatoes. And here's one page. Here's one page from this catalog. One page. These are tomatoes. These are tomatoes pink to purple, as opposed to tomatoes red, or tomatoes yellow, or tomatoes black. So tomatoes pink to purple. Cannabec Super, Canary Rose, Kankovic Yugoslavian, Karakoy de Bois, Caspian Pink, Caspian Rose, Seman, Charlie Scott, Wartime, Chateau Rose, Cherokee Purple, Cherry Brandywine, Cherry Pink, Chianti Rose, Chris Ukrainian, Climbing Trip, Coburg Corazon, Coucher de Soleil, Crimean Rose, Krnovic Yugoslavian, Da Costa's Portuguese, Da Kestanski, Dauphin,
Okay,
Debbie
okay.
That's one page.
Yeah.
One page. It's a world. It's an entire world. Why? The reason I went to that effort to read all that is to show you that of all the seed houses you want to order from, don't forget Seeds of Diversity, because that's where the treasures are. Many of them.
So we just have one last question, and then I think we need to wrap up. Does
Okay.
labeling them as open pollinated help people know about the risks of hybridizing / cross-pollinating?
I didn't catch the first part of the question. Give it to me again, please.
Okay. Does labeling them as open pollinated help to let people know about the risk of hybridizing / cross-pollinating?
No, it does not. This is kind of esoteric knowledge. It's something you have to educate yourself. And because I was being careful, I didn't start laying out charts of distances. It varies for what kind of plant you're growing, whether it's annual, biennial, perennial, self-seeding. For example, the cucurbits, the squashes and pumpkins and cucumbers actually are 4 separate species. And depending on which ones you're growing, you could grow like a zucchini next or to I can't think of what the separate things are, how they break down. But you could grow the different species side by side, and they would not cross. Many people, when they're growing squash, will actually pollinate the female flowers with the male flowers, and then put a bag around them, a paper bag with a tie, to prevent them from crossing. It's kind of difficult to isolate and eliminate cross-pollination, especially by insects. So many seeds are advertised as OP. That means that they're true breeding. But that does not mean that the person buying and planting them really understands how to isolate them, nor the importance of true breeding seeds as heritage varieties.
Right, so that's a good thing to end with, is to do a little bit of research yourselves, kind of know what you're getting into, contact Seeds University if you have questions, get to know your local horticultural society. Just, you know, ask, make connections. It helps, and then it makes the connections if you want to swap seeds.
Absolutely agree with you. Seeds is a world, a universe. It's a journey, and you have so much to learn. I have so much to learn, and I have a couple of final things I want to pass on, if that's okay, if we have time.
I think we have about 2 or 3 minutes, if we can.
I can do that. Okay. I mentioned poems and droops, and I want to make sure people know that a poem, when you're talking about literature, is different from a poem when you're talking about apples and quinces and pears. Poem is P-O-M-E, and droop, as in almonds and peaches and nectarines, is D-R-U-P-E, droop. I also wanted to say that there's a big difference between hybridization, which humans have been doing for thousands of years consciously, and genetic modification, which we will not talk about today. And finally, I want to suggest a couple of more resources. Here's one that I thought I didn't put in the video. This lovely man who lives on Salt Spring Island, my buddy Dan Jason, has this lovely little book published by Harbor Publishing in British Columbia. And this is a really nice small illustration about how to save seeds. This is a really good one. And finally, if you're totally insane about seeds, the book you want is this one. It's The Seeds of Woody Plants in North America. This has information about how to scarify, sprout, stratify, germinate the seeds of every single tree and shrub on our continent.
Wow.
For the totally over the hill folks.
Yeah, that's when we're getting outside vegetables and into just everything.
Oh, it's all seeds, yes.
The other category. Well,
Helen and Allison, thank you so much. It's been great to be here, and I hope that people have gotten something out of this. I absolutely meant that I answer my emails. I do. And thank you so much for bringing me back to Halton. I have great memories of playing in front of a huge fireplace in the farmhouse there.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think everybody learned something here. I know I did, and it's been a pleasure to speak with you this afternoon.
You guys have a wonderful series of events going on. I'm so impressed. Thank you for making me part of it.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Thanks, everyone.